ungrateful child are you? You should be happy you get food on your plate. Your mom!
Hey Dungebags, what's going on? It's Landon Remixes here, and it's time for a review of the Shelter Live Tour from Porter Robinson and Madeon. Now you're probably thinking, hey Landon, you're a little late to this considering the Shelter Live Tour literally just ended. And I guess I can say there's a couple reasons as to why I didn't film this video earlier. One, because I didn't see the Shelter Live Tour until literally last night, the final day of the North American tour in Seattle at the WAMU Theater. And secondly, even if I had caught the show sooner, I like to keep my channel as spoiler-free as possible, so obviously if you're going to be catching Porter Robinson and Madeon on the European tour and the Australian tour, you should probably turn away this video because I'm going to talk about a lot of the technical aspects of the show itself. And if you don't want to find out about that, if you've been staying away from videos of the concert, I'd probably suggest you don't watch this video. But since it's through the majority of the tour, which is the North American portion of it, I figured it would be a good time to talk about it now. And I know I said I was going to review Deadmau5 next, but I can assure you it is going to be the next video after this one. I just figured I really need to do this live tour review before it's no longer fresh on my mind. If you're wondering why I felt it so important to record a review of this live tour prior to my channel's typical content, it's mostly because I had gotten a request a long time ago to do a review of this tour, and obviously that's been in the back of my mind all the way leading up to this actual show itself. And when I actually participated in the concert itself, I was thinking about a lot of the things that I was going to say in my review of it, and different things that I could talk about, different things that I didn't like about it, different things that I did like about it. So obviously I think it was important to put something together about this, because Porter Robinson and Madeon are two of my favorite artists who had released two of my favorite albums. I think actually Porter Robinson's Worlds obviously was my #1 album of 2014. That was the first review type video that I ever did on this channel. And then Madeon's Adventure album also placed in my top 10 last year. So obviously it was going to be important to be touching on their live show together. Just first of all, on a side note, I don't want to spend too much time talking about this, but I think Porter Robinson and Madeon did an excellent job picking out openers for this. I can't exactly remember who were the openers exactly on most of the other tour dates, but on mine, I got San Holo and Robotaki, and I think Robotaki especially fit very well into the style of Porter Robinson and Madeon's set. Very minimal, at least in some portions. Actually, the only ID, meaning nameless track that Porter Robinson and Madeon played as a collaboration, sounded a lot like it could have been a Robotaki track. So because of that, even though it was a very sharp transition from DJ sets into a live show, I think it was pretty smooth overall. San Holo definitely didn't disappoint either. I was actually really looking forward to his set quite a bit, and he definitely didn't let me down. I've reviewed his content a few times on this channel, and he had an immense amount of energy with him that I have a lot of respect for artists who can just go absolutely nuts on stage and not feel like a fool for doing it, and San Holo definitely brought that. Played a lot of originals, played a lot of remixes, a lot of stuff that I knew, played a little bit of his Monster Cat content as well, but he definitely skipped out on a majority of stuff that I thought he was going to play, but it ended up okay because it ended up being a pretty well put together set. I know a lot of you here have probably already watched my track review of Shelter. If you don't remember that one, I'm obviously going to link it in the description. But I didn't really love the track that much, and probably just for a few reasons I felt like Madeon really took the center of that track in terms of sound, although I do definitely hear more Porter Robinson influence now in terms of the chords, but just in terms of the vocal chops and the vocals themselves, I definitely heard a lot more Madeon, and obviously that's targeted to be like that. I still don't absolutely love Shelter, but I can definitely say I have a lot more respect for the song after seeing it live, especially with Madeon's vocals. He absolutely killed the vocal game last night at the show. Because prior to Madeon's album, specifically Home, we hadn't heard Madeon sing before, and it turns out he has a pretty good voice, and I didn't know how he was going to be able to mimic that live, but he did it, as well as Porter Robinson sang a lot of new stuff in terms of even, he did a cover of Beings by Madeon on his own and sang that, which was very odd. But when I saw Porter Robinson on his Worlds tour, I think he only sang on Sad Machine, and this one he had a lot more vocal appearances, but obviously Madeon took the lead in that, probably because he's a little bit better of a singer for the most part. But here's the thing, the Shelter Live Tour literally opens up with Shelter as its opening track, and I kind of didn't really understand all the emotion behind everyone just screaming the lyrics of that song until I watched the music video literally this morning for the song, which I had just kind of glossed over, probably just was thinking, oh, Porter Robinson and anime again. I guess I wasn't really interested. Anime isn't something I'm necessarily passionate about. But when I got through this, there's just a certain level of beauty that really evokes that, and obviously having a song that ties into that and a lyric set like that definitely pushes farther in. And I really actually love the vocal appearance by Madeon at this point, although I don't necessarily love the production. So I guess you could say I really like the track now, not necessarily because of it as a standalone, but because of the accompanying music video. I can definitely see myself coming back to that a few times in the near future. Now I've got to be straight. I didn't absolutely love the show. I don't think it's my favorite concert that I've been to this year, although I would probably place it up there in my top 3 or 5. And you can very well go ahead and blame that on my expectations of the show, because I probably went into this show with the wrong expectations for it. See, prior to going to this show, really the only thing I had seen other than Shelter the track itself was a live video combining You're On with Sad Machine, and I thought a lot of the show was going to be like that. Originals by Porter Robinson, originals by Madeon, and mashups of the two, which I thought was going to be really cool and interesting. Obviously, just a different take on each of their respective albums. And being such a fan of the tracks that were on Worlds and the tracks that were on Adventure, obviously I was very excited to see these performed live. And the thing is, they're not exactly how you'd expect them to go, because a lot of these are different takes and remixes that Porter Robinson and Madeon have done together. It feels a lot more like these pieces of the songs have been sampled into an entirely new work rather than them performing these separate tracks. Obviously, there are still a lot of elements from the original tracks, but for the most part, it feels much more like a collaborative work, which I probably should like more, but probably didn't. Now, standing in the audience there more as a Porter Robinson fan, obviously I had my arms crossed thinking, oh, there's so much Madeon in this show, I want to see more Porter Robinson songs. I actually looked back at the track list this morning, actually, and there were very little more Madeon appearances in terms of the actual tracks themselves, like track names, track numbers. There were just about the same amount. I probably think there are slightly more appearances where Porter Robinson's songs are sampled into Madeon's songs, but for the most part I definitely say what I said initially in terms of they're both kind of sampled, they're both taking pieces from each element of the album and then combining them into an entirely new work. It's something completely different than both of the albums, which made it very hard for me to really get into, because I like familiarity when it comes to shows. I like to see a little bit, obviously, stretching out, seeing what they can do, but when it follows a formula that's very different, it's very hard for me to get into that, especially when they haven't necessarily pulled something extremely interesting. Now just let me explain that a little. In Porter Robinson's live shows, actually my favorite songs were the ones that he flipped into something else. For example, the live edit of Fresh Static Snow, the one that basically just goes just completely bass heavy, something that you wouldn't necessarily expect. And that's kind of what I was hoping for would happen in this show too. Obviously the Fresh Static Snow edit got completely cut out of this show, which wasn't extremely disappointing, obviously, because I had already had that experience before at my World's Live experience. But with this show, the VIPs feel a lot less unique and surprising, and they more just feel like remakes of Flicker over and over and over again. And I didn't really see this until after I got out of the show, but there's so much of that 90 to 95 BPM indie dance, some people might like to call it drum step. So much of the show seemed to follow that same formula, which honestly made it to be a little bit boring, even though obviously I very much liked the style of Flicker at the time of its release. I do think though that there were definitely some appearances where these versions of the songs made for a lot better live performances than their originals. For example, I remember Sea of Voices from the World's Live Tour was absolutely terrible. It was just so underwhelming. There was really a lot of forced emotion there, and that was very surprising for probably my favorite track off the World's album. Just very hard to get into live, but the version that they used in this one was a lot harder, a lot easier to get into. The crowd was much more into dancing to this kind of stuff, and it wasn't just the awkward doo-ch, doo-ch, dooch, if you kind of get what I'm saying. I definitely don't get the impression that I'm trying to pick on Madeon with this just because I'm more of a Porter Robinson fan. I think Madeon's live show portion of this was absolutely killer. I had never seen Madeon prior to this. I definitely think him and Porter Robinson, though, take a very similar creative approach when it comes to live stuff. In fact, I think Shelter Live was arguably an even better live show than Worlds Live, although when I did see Porter Robinson on his Worlds tour, it was He was an opener for Iggy Azalea and Icona Pop, so obviously he probably didn't play his full set, and the crowd was just absolutely terrible. I meant to actually do a review of that show as well, but I just really didn't feel like that would have been a good idea, considering really the crowd probably ruined the show for me. No one was getting into it. Of course there were a few Porter Robinson fans in there, but I could tell I was the only one of very few of them in the crowd. And obviously this was my first Madeon concert. I didn't catch him on his Adventure Live tour or anything like that, so on his aspect of the show there's not really much I can compare it to. Otherwise I probably would have been even more critical of this live show, whether that be good or bad, I'm not really sure. And my conclusion when it comes to Shelter Live is that you're probably going to enjoy this show a lot more, either if you're not much of a fan of Porter Robinson or if you're not much of a fan of Madeon, because then you'll probably get a lot of elements from both of their respective opposite albums that you wouldn't necessarily expect to hear in that music, but if you like both of the albums a lot, it's going to feel kind of odd and when these things are mixed together in such a way. But in terms of the actual music aspect, I am very much going to stick to my thoughts from my Shelter track review, in that Porter Robinson and Madeon have very similar creative minds. They work very together as a live duo, and I would love to see them work on an album together, although I don't think that's probably going to come very close in the near future. We might see that maybe 3 or 4 years down the road. Even right now, I think they're enjoying the success of the single Shelter, and I don't think that is going to lead into any album based on the things that they said at the show last night and the fact that it was released on vinyl as a single. If it hadn't, I probably would have had more hope that a full album and physical release would come to that, although they might end up surprising me after the Shelter live tour has concluded for worldwide and not just North America, but we'll just have to see about that. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Today, there's nothing really that I can link into Spotify in the description, so I guess you guys won't get that, but I will have some other stuff in the description, related things that you guys might want to check out, like my Madeon Adventure review. I'll definitely be linking down in the description below if you guys want to check that one out. Also, my thoughts on Shelter, the track, will be down there as well. Look forward to that W Drive 2016 album review next. I'll see you guys then. I'm Landon Remixes. Peace out.